right. Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing? Hopefully my mic is good. Hopefully everything's good. Thank you so much for waiting. It was quite a delay. There were a few things that weren't connecting quite right, and I think it was just more of a cable thing than anything, but I think we got the setup here. Let me go ahead and take this banner down, Hopefully I sound okay. I'll start with the audio first, if that is okay with you guys. Let me go into the chat, see how you guys are doing. All right, music sounds good, as my wonderful prof says, and he also says coming in loud and clear. Yeah, so what had happened was I was hoping to get right onto the stream at 5:30. I'm trying to do it slightly earlier. I'm actually trying to, get things done slightly earlier, just in the day, especially on a Sunday. And we're working with this new machine, this great machine that has a really good camera. Excuse me, my throat's a little dry here from probably the grass. So we didn't have the right password for this machine, and Professor Geek was out doing yard work, and I had to go track him down for the right password and also for some more help. So we're all good now. We're going to be talking about the culture war. So let me grab some water real quick. Yeah, that track was Sunkissed, my first album. You can check it out at Sound Engraver. All right, let's see what this camera looks like, because I have the lighting not quite set up, so it might be a little too bright. Oh, it is kind of bright. Yeah, that is kind of bright. I might want to fix that. 1 second. Actually, I'm going to, I think that's okay. I think it's just really nice and warm outside, so I have my hair up. All right, turn on video. I did. So let's go ahead and see. Let me check the light real quick. 1 second. I know the settings that I do like, and it just takes a little bit of time. You can hear me click all the options. Or maybe you can't hear the click. I don't know if you can hear it from the microphone. Whew. Different extreme settings for the light. All right, let's try that. Oh, I changed it. Oh well. All right, let's turn on the camera. I think that's a little better. We'll see. We shall see. I'm going to just adjust it a little bit like that. Thanks, guys. Do appreciate that. Okay, so hopefully you guys are doing well. Let's go ahead and see who is in with us. Actually, you know what? Bear with me one moment. I'm going to open the door because it's warm in here. All right. Okay, back to camera. All right, now we should be good to go. Thanks, guys. Do appreciate that. So, let us see. We're talking about the culture war, of course, Star Wars, the original Star Wars. I actually have to tell you a story before starting with the chat, but I have this one music student, and apparently she and her dad are big Star Wars fans, and because she commented on my shirt, this was the matter of conversation, the subject of conversation right here, and this dad really likes things like EU and some of the Clone Wars, but his 13-year-old daughter loves Ahsoka, and she was saying, "Oh, I love the Ahsoka series." I'm like, or what did I say? I think so. She said, "I love the Ahsoka series." I'm like, that just breaks my heart. And she's like, "What, Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order?" I said, "No, you loving Ahsoka." And she gave me this shocked face. She looked really surprised by my comment. I don't know if she would I think she would like me less as a teacher if she really knew my opinions on such things. So anyway, let's see how y'all doing. So Ghost Planet is first in the chat. Welcome. Good to see you. Of course, my wonderful Professor Geek, listening while weed trimming. Yeah, he's doing a lot of yard work, and it's hot. It's hot outside. It's hot in here too, and this is more underground. We've got Samuel Proctor. Here's how to do it, you say. Everyone stops consuming the mainstream sources of stories. It all collapses in bankruptcy, then reintroduces the classics. Then we reintroduce the classics and start creating our own independent studios outside of California. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing. But I'm going to come at this because we we've been talking about the war on culture, as I'm calling it, culture war. We've been talking about this kind of thing for years. Like, not just me, of course, not just Professor Geek, but all sorts of people in the YouTube sphere. I guess mainstream conservative media, they're so slow when it comes to this kind of stuff. And it's not just a conservative thing. This is just hey, you value some core tenets of good art? Well, I've got things to say. What I'm going to talk about with the culture war is something actually that inspired me. Something of RJ's recent video, from the Fourth Age. I highly recommend his channel if you don't know, but I'm sure most of you know who RJ from the Fourth Age is. So, but his most recent video from yesterday, really inspired the topic for today. So I'm going to come at it with stuff we already know, but also approaching it with a little different perspective, hopefully. Or if I was just repeating myself, I want to talk about these things. I don't like repeating myself if I can help it. Okay, Cult Television, welcome. Good to see you. Disconnect. So now you guys are offering suggestions. You are saying disconnect from the current consumption, and openly refute it. Yes. All these are good. In fact, this is kind of what we're talking about here. Samuel also says, gatekeep from the current intellectual elites. Oh, that's good. That is good. I would say, too, I'll add to that, avoid cliques. Even if it's people you agree with, avoid just siding with the opposite side, if that makes sense. We got to be a little bit more ingenious about it. All right. Private Eye, good to see you. Ace is also in. Also good to see you. Let the show begin. Yeah, finally. Brian Gilmartin says, how to win the culture war. First off, stop whining and do something about it. Well, I think it is, I think the culture of complaining can be taken too far. And I think we do need to proactively create new things. I will say, though, I do value the importance of critique, of the critical of it without consuming it. So be critical of something without consuming it. Yeah. Ginyu, haven't seen you in a long time. Good to see. Hi guys, keep up the good fight. Thank you for saying the music sounds great. Megatron is in. Adega Outlaw is also in. Alessandro De Salvo, which I have seen you. Have you visited me before here on this stream? I know I've seen you on RJ's streams, which is always great to see. All right. Final Fantasy, good to have you. Leia Plus Size, nice to have you here. I thought Captain America on the thumbnail would get you here, Leia Plus Size. And Big Al, my friend, thank you for wishing me a great stream. And I believe I have included everyone, at least in the chat. So we've got 20 people. That's good. I might be drinking a lot of water today because it's like 86 degrees out, and that doesn't seem like a lot, but in the states we're in, it's a lot of humidity, it's a lot of haziness, it's a lot of pollen. So yeah, I already miss winter. I love winter. It was a very cool day yesterday, and I felt 10 years younger. It was great. But anyhow, let's talk about the war on culture. And I'll just talk a little bit, and then, as per usual, we'll talk about it in the discussion. So anyway, so not just talking about the war on culture, but how to win the war on culture. And I've got a few ideas. Ideas we might already be familiar with, but just giving you some new perspective. Let's first talk about the reality of the situation. We are in a culture war, and there are so many people that are dismissive of it, but I've noticed there's a particular antagonism when it comes to arguments saying, oh, there's no such thing as a culture war, or these people argue that there's a culture war. There's no culture war. It's all just in their heads. And I'm like, well, if there's something going on extensively for years on end in the public square, it's valid. It's a valid thing. It's valid enough to talk about, to be concerned with. I usually get the impression that people who dismiss the culture war are those who might not be on our side of the culture war, or just think it's like, well, It's not a big deal. Just life goes on. Entertainment is entertainment. It's not valuable. It's not, it's not life threatening. It's, you're not going hungry, I get that argument a lot. Like, why is art so important? It's not like you're starving. It's like, they're two different things. Two different things to care about, You can care about both things. You don't have to just care about people starving to death, That's sort of besides the point. But there's this ultimate dismissiveness, people antagonizing the argument, yes, there is a culture war. So the reality of it is, yes, we've been facing a culture war. Okay, so in mainstream entertainment for the last decade or so, RJ argues for comics probably as early as the 90s or maybe 80s. I can't remember the timeline he's given it. So everyone is experiencing it in different ways. Myself, having 3 music degrees, being in the liberal arts for like 7 years, I saw the culture war since before World War I. I've always made that point. So, I mean, it's, the attack on traditions, the attack on core tenets, the core fundamentals of what makes culture our culture. Now, I actually want to speak, before I forget, I do want to say, when I'm talking about culture, I'm really referring to the West. I do want to make sure that, some people do listen to me from different parts of the world. So there's, I've got people listening from different continents, different countries. So I'm speaking more of Western culture. In fact, I'm probably strictly speaking of Western culture, not in an exclusive way, but if you are coming from a different region in the world, you might think, oh, that's not a big deal. And it might not be a big deal concerning your specific region of the world. So your culture might be different. What I have to say might be a different perspective if you're, on the other side of the world. So when I'm talking about the culture war, I'm more talking about how mainstream entertainment is working, mainstream art, or, anything revolving art, especially Western art, coming from a liberal arts background. So that's where I'm coming from. Any arguments I make going forward. But people more or less understand that. I just want to say, like, oh, this isn't applying to my culture. It might not. I'm actually talking specifically about Western culture. So anyway, that's the first thing. All right. So the reality of it is we are in a culture war, and we have traditional things, traditional tenets for a good society, not just a society as far as economics or, commerce or infrastructure, but just our spiritual and physical and emotional well-being as people, living here, at least in the United States or in North America. We're facing, we have faced many battles, many attacks on traditional values. And they could be American values, or they just could be family values or religious values, or, values that are tenets of the Western culture. Whatever the case is, it's been attacked. And, at least you guys, speaking from your own experience, this is mostly from mainstream art, mainstream entertainment. Now, I don't get this from you guys. I don't get this from my own listeners and comments on my own videos. But RJ, for instance, some of his impressions of some of his listeners, they've said to him in so many words, because he's reiterated it on his videos, on his commentary. Some of his listeners say that there's, hope is just around the bend. That the pendulum is going to swing, and we're going to weed out these ideologues out of the mainstream entertainment or the institutions or our beloved Star Wars stories, all that. And so I don't get this from you guys. I don't get this from my listeners. Thank you always for listening. But it just led me to believe with RJ and his listeners that there are people out there who think hope and good change is just around the corner. We're going to see the downfall. We're going to see the bankruptcy of the likes of Disney or Warner Brothers or whatever the case is. There's going to be some economical downturn because their stories that they churn up is just awful, and everything will be, as the old saying goes, hotsy totsy. I don't know. I heard that from the 50s. I would love to have that attitude. I would love to say, hey, yeah, this is just temporary, you know. This is just for another few years. You know, yeah, it really took off a certain election year, but it's gonna get better. Like, and I think it's gonna get better in just a matter of a year or two. So this is the sentiment that some people have. You know, some people who are on our side who are tired of like the absolute deconstruction of stories and IPs and all that. They're saying, okay, we just have to wait it out. We just have to endure it, put up with it. Let's gripe it and complain about it. But it's gonna, you know, there's gonna be a few downfalls, and then people will come to the realization that, oh, it's gonna be better. It's gonna be better, and it will be better, but not in things that were, not with companies, not with IPs, not with beloved characters, not with beloved stories and the continuation of those stories. It's not going to happen with any of that. Where it's going to happen, as we all know, it's going to happen when we have our own course of correction, when we produce our own things. Now, I want to stress something very important. So there are some people who believe it's going to change. There's going to be a good change like in a year or two. I have to say, and this was from RJ's recent video, and he's absolutely right about this, knowing the liberal arts education myself, this culture war is never going to stop until these ideologues win. And what does it mean when they win? Well, it means taking over, which they have taken over a lot of these properties, these creative properties, and invading every other space. So it's not just about invasion, takeover, with something like Disney, for instance. They want to take control over every single aspect of your life, of your being. So not just art, not just entertainment, but the way you think, the way you conduct yourself, the way you behave. Now, entertainment being a tenet of our society, and how we how we get values from our entertainment, from our art. Well, that's a big thing, and they took over that. They have like a swarm of bees, just taking over the space, and they're trying to like root out anyone who has a dissenting opinion or philosophy or religion, you know, belief, whatever. They will not be happy. These ideologues will never be happy with anything they have until they have won the culture war, until everyone else is utterly defeated. And RJ was mentioning this, and this is absolutely important. He was saying the reason why they won't be happy with just their little dominion is because they need control over everything. Everything amounts to power, exclusively power. Now, this sounds very far-fetched when I speak it, because it's such a dominating thought when you think about it. But where else is their behavior coming from? Like their motives are to, weed out everyone with the wrong opinion, for instance. We had major cases recently in the last couple weeks. In RJ's video, there was a comic creator who, as far as RJ was concerned, he could see this creator was not leaning on either side of the spectrum. I hear my husband. But this creator, unfortunately, because of certain social encounters and online antagonism, unfortunately, this creator ended his life. And I looked into it a little bit, and it's very sad. But that's this kind of bullying behavior, like pushing someone to the brink and over the brink. That's not behavior indicating anything else but a power struggle or control. They want control over people. Now, why RJ brought this up is this person, this comic book creator, was able to, at least from what I heard in the video, he was young enough to teach how to make good comic books. So actually, I want to kind of make sure I'm saying everything I want to say before getting into this, but I do want to welcome a few more people. Amy L, good to see you. And Andreas Hernandez, also good to see you. You say, it's funny that you say they're like a swarm of bees. The way the ideologues are programmed is like they have a hive mind. Yeah, bees, locusts, it's kind of that same collective dominating force, right? And people can argue saying that's not true. You're being hyperbolic about it. It's like, but their behavior. No, I'm just kidding. Their behavior indicates as much. Let's go back to really quick the reality of it. So the culture war is not going to end. It's not going to end until one side wins, because the ideologues will not be happy until they have dominated the entire space, whatever that space may be. The reality of the situation is that we have to accept that the culture war is more or less going to be a lifelong battle for any of us who are creative ourselves or who contribute to the discussion of things like what good art is. So if you have a mind to create yourself or promote good art and all of that, just know you're going to, in one form or another, be on the front lines of this battle. And I would want to encourage you that it's going to be a lifelong attitude. It's going to be a lifelong endurance of some kind. Now, if you, at any point, you are creating something and it takes hold culturally, let's say you have a story that over the course of time takes off, based on RJ and his reasonings, and I agree with him, you will face antagonism, because just for your story or your art piece being good and being on its own and standing on its own, just its existence is enough of a threat where the ideologues want to, just dominate and bully you or antagonize you. Now, I will say you need your art needs some voice, some prevalence. Maybe I can easily see it with me, where it's like, okay, I have a very small space of people liking my music or future sci-fi stories and stuff like that. I just lost my train of thought. If it's a small enough space, if it's a small enough circle of listeners or viewers or readers, if you have a small enough readership, then maybe you won't face any major antagonism. But if you do have an online presence, or if your art piece has enough of a presence, a social presence, it's to be expected that you will get pushback, just simply for promoting your stuff. If it stands on its own, if it's not aligned with any certain agenda or messaging or anything like that. So that's the reality of it. I wanted to talk about the reality of it, where you are just expect within reason that this could be a lifelong battle. And I'm fine with just contributing, whether it's talking about good art and all that, or creating stories, or electronic music is so tame. I don't think anyone would have a problem with electronic music, especially if there are no words. I mean, the only thing I could think of is like if I did something biblically based or something like that, but I can't expect it. But that's the reality of it. So let's talk about it being a lifelong battle. If I could talk, sorry, it's my mouth is dry. Let's talk about being this being a lifelong battle, and then seeing what we can do about it. Yeah, 1 second. Looks like I am freezing. One second. I'm gonna also just grab a swig of water real quick too. Ah, much better. It is warm. Anyway, so the battle in front of us. So what should we do? Now, what you guys have already suggested is really important. First, I think the most important thing is to drive the ideology. And let's face it, it's progressive ideology. I hate to sound so political, but it is. I mean, it's infested in art And this is more or less a music slash art channel, so I'm going to be talking about it. But I mean, even academics recently are talking about it and talking about it being a problem. So I'm like, okay, if college academics based in Europe are talking about this, I feel safe enough to talk about this myself. But it is a progressive ideology invading the space. And so, what should you do? Well, I've said this so many times, maybe not on my stream, but in different comments and discourse, dis- discussion. Um, the the best currency, the best attack. Well, I would say, well, how would I put this? Relevancy is their best currency. So if complaining and griping and putting out content that is just all about bashing a certain TV show or a certain story, a certain comic or whatever, if that's all you do, that is relevance and that is currency. That means more to these people than money. Attention, relevance. So I would say the best thing that could ever happen. I'm actually gonna just turn off my camera for a quick second. Best thing that could ever happen is like for something like Rings of Power, for instance, and I think that's going to be released this year, is for no one to watch it, you know? So, wouldn't that be wonderful if everyone just switched off? You know, like if social media went down for like a day. But in the case with Rings of Power, like no one tuned in. That would be an absolute blow to everyone involved in Rings of Power. It'd be such a statement. It would be a wonderful, wonderful thing to see where no one tunes in. Like absolutely no one. But that's a miracle that we really can't expect. But it's an attitude we need to adopt. It needs to be where we deprive them, we starve them of attention. That's a very difficult demand when it comes to things like social media, and especially with something like YouTube commentary. I always want to come I always want to come from a place of not attacking Rings of Power just by itself, but to uplift what had come before that atrocity, which is, of course, is Tolkien and his work. So if I ever talked about Rings of Power, it would be in comparison to the better past, to Tolkien himself. So it shouldn't be mindless outrage against Rings of Power. It shouldn't be just saying, oh, look at this atrocity, look at this dumpster fire. Yeah, well, what are you going to compare it with? You have to promote the good while contrasting the good with the abomination that is Rings of Power. It can't just be griping about Rings of Power because that's what they want. That's what those producers want. That's what the showrunners want. That's what Amazon wants. Amazon and, well, not Amazon as a company, but people who are releasing such a show and helping promote such a show, they want the fans of Lord of the Rings to be outraged. It's a personal victory of theirs. The madder you are, the more the victory, the greater the victory they have, is what I'm trying to say. So, that's the first thing is, okay, to be proactive against this ideology is, okay, we got to starve them of the attention they so desperately seek. What that means is, okay, maybe you don't contribute to that. Maybe you aren't offering commentary and, outraged reviews and all that. But, to be responsible, you have to also stop tuning into the outrage. Even if you're not contributing it apart from a view on a video, it's still a contribution. And so, I mean, even just for better health, for better mental health, it would be good to abstain from that. Yeah, that's a strong word, but that's the word I'm going to use. Let me see if the camera's working okay. Okay, hopefully I'm doing okay. Anyway, that's the first thing. So that just to starve them of that attention. Don't complain about it on social media. If you are criticizing it, compare it with something else. Like promote good art with this comparison. So if you want to complain about something like Rings of Power, then promote what makes Tolkien and his work so beloved. What's your favorite work of Tolkien's? What's your favorite part of Middle Earth and its true lore, not anything that Amazon is producing? So that's the first thing. The second thing that you mentioned, you guys are great. We have to create our own works. And I think that is a fundamental thing. I think to keep the posterity, or I would say to keep, how should I put this? To prolong the life of good art. It's not really my favorite phrase and not my favorite way of saying it, but really I'll just say to extend the life of what is good. We have to not just promote what is good, but we have to make what is good. And there are a lot of creatives in this chat, which is wonderful. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's kind of a responsibility. You have to be good at what you do, and that's a lifelong process. It takes years. It's not just 5 years. It's not just a decade. It is a lifelong process to promote what is good. Now, I want to actually give you a little bit of a sidebar. I'm not seeing this everywhere, but the more I tune into independent projects, the more I see there is this, there's good art. I do see good art, but I don't see it. I see a lot of good art, like with Graham Nolan, for instance, but there also is out there art that is not reaching the standard of what has come before. And I think that's important to extend the life of good art and good cultural tradition that art procures. You got to be good. You got to go back to the standard of what is excellent, and you got to go back to the classics. So if you're making a comic book, for instance, you really have to be mindful, not completely imitating the style, for instance, of an old comic book from the 60s. I'm not saying that, but the quota, not the quota, the quotient, the score has to be there. The standard of excellence has to be there. And I see a lot of well-meaning artists, or not artists, but creators, even people who hire artists for their work. I see the potential of a very good thing, but I also see extreme lack. I was looking over someone's independent project that I really like him as a commentator, and he's a friend of a few YouTube friends and all that. I won't mention his name. Very likable personality, very likable guy. And I was looking over his independent work for his campaign, and there were things that were very strong about the art involved in that work. But then I was noticing, and I'm not a visual artist, but I noticed there was something lacking. I was like, this style is not quite right. It's everything looks a little too clean. Everything looks limited in detail. And I'm not even a visual artist, I'm a musician and a composer. So I thought, okay, well, I do appreciate the gumption and the production of independent art out there. But I would say the standard has to be higher than what I'm seeing. Not with everyone. With someone like Graham Nolan, Professor Geek is happy to review recent works of Graham Nolan's recent campaigns. With his Monster Island, wonderful illustrations. He's such a good artist, And same thing with my recent experience with Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog. Like the story's great, but the art is, I spend minutes on a page just looking over the art because it's so well done. Now, that's awesome. We've got figures like Van Sciver and Graham Nolan. Here's the, what I say, caveat? I don't know. The, the problem with that is they're a little bit later. They're a previous generation, a couple previous generations, and we have the responsibility, at least to see that younger generations, whether it's in comics or any other art form, younger generations do need a kind of tutelage, a kind of pedagogy. They need the information to know, okay, what made comic book art good to begin with? What made it classic to begin with? And if younger people, younger creatives do not have that knowledge, then that life that I'm talking about, extending the life of good art, that's going to get whittled down to nothing, to its own withering away. Now, I'm using the specific example of comic book, but the comic book, but the information is valid for any art form. That perspective is true for every art form. If the younger generation, in my case, doesn't know how to make good music, whether it's composing or playing an instrument, well, where are they going to get that information? Yeah, they have it. They have a plethora of videos to go through, very good videos to go through, from older people or teachers on YouTube, for instance, which is wonderful. But what if that information goes away? Like, what if 30 years from now, that information, for some reason, for YouTube going away or whatever the case is, what if that information goes away? And then what's now the younger generation gets older, and 30 years from now, they're in their 60s or their 50s and stuff, and they don't have that pedagogical information, like that retention of what they were taught to pass on to the next generation of musicians or composers or songwriters, whatever the case is. I have a lot of students right now. I have to, like, at the expense of their absolute boredom, I have to review the fundamentals, even when they think I know it. I read it in their face. They think they know the fundamentals, and they don't. They don't know what they're doing is incorrect. They're just going through the motions, and I have to, like, break it down. And it's a chore for me, and I risk not being liked for that as a teacher. But the whole point of that is it is imperative that I pass on what information I know, because I was taught the same thing. I was classically trained. I had classical training, classical technique, not all the way. It wasn't a very strict. It wasn't that strict. It wasn't too rigid as some people have. But the music education is changing, for political reasons, for social reasons, just for reasons of trying to be nice to the student. They can't handle the stress. All this stuff is changing, I don't think for the better. And RJ was making a point in his video, but I think he mentioned it on his last stream, that all the good artists for, in the comic space, they're all 50 and above. They're 50 years old and above. It's not to say that the younger guys aren't doing well, but the question is, are they holding that same standard of excellence for their work? And this particular person that I looked at, as far as his campaign, I saw some strengths, like in things like character design. I thought that was like, okay, this is good, this is solid. But then I was looking at things like backgrounds, landscapes, buildings. I was like, okay, if this is a stylistic choice, I don't know if it's a good one. If this is a particular illustrator's way of doing things, even if this person is a professional, I don't know if it's the right call. I don't know how old this illustrator is. Maybe he's young. Maybe he's not a he. I think he was a he when I think I saw the list of names. Is he 30? Is he 20? Is he 50? And then he's just had these bad habits? I'm not saying he can't illustrate. I'm just saying there are definite things I'm like, okay, this isn't what I saw with, Darwin Cook, for instance, So we got to be careful. So when we're making our independent art, we have to make sure we're not only creating very good art, but we're retaining, like it's a matter of retention. We're retaining the ability to pass on what is good to the next generation. So there's a degree of accountability. Some people don't take that seriously. I kind of do. No, I don't kind of. I do because of my nature as a teacher. It's important to pass on information. So we got the first two, right? Of okay, how do we win the culture war? The first thing is we don't just complain. We promote good art with the complaint. You know, if we are critical of a bad piece of art, we need to promote what is good. That's the first thing. And then when we are producing what is good, we have to make sure it's good. We have to almost be gatekeepers of ourselves, if that makes sense. So like, okay, I know 10 years from now, I'm going to be better than I am now. But from what I'm offering now, you know, with what I'm offering now, is it good or can it be better? You know, you always have to ask yourself that. And that is just so people do have the knowledge. You know, they you know, people 30 years, 60 years, 100 years from now, they have the same knowledge of excellence that you have right now because you were given to that by a mentor, by a YouTuber, by a personality, by an artist, whatever the case is. It's like, oh, I have this. Can I produce something which will ensure that same knowledge, you know, to be passed down to the generation, the younger generation, you know, 30, 50 years from now. So that's also important. And I just want to make one more comment on that. I think RJ was talking about how, well, the reason why I thought of this was when he mentioned it, but also because he had mentioned in his video, I think it was Will Eisner, that his books on creating a good comic book, Will Eisner's book, is being re-edited and certain things are being taken out because of censorship. It's like you that is a very perilous thing to do. No matter how culturally outdated it is. If Will Eisner has the knowledge, that golden knowledge of creating a good comic book, you should keep everything of his and do not edit things out. Do not paraphrase. Do not reintroduce, refashion as something new. Like, oh, it's the same idea but worded differently. It's like, no, that's very crucial knowledge. It's good knowledge to have. And so that's a cautionary thing. That's a cautionary, okay, people are really trying to edit information and instruction and pedagogy. All this really important stuff that it really shouldn't be tampered with. Shouldn't be changed. Shouldn't be touched, you know? And it's happening. So, you know, produce good art, but also educate what is good art. I'm going to make one more comment on that before getting back into the chat. But let me grab some water real quick. All right, so how can you how can you promote good art? This is where I'm going to nag a little. And that is, it's not enough to say, hey, I like this movie. I like this book. Go read that book. Go read that manga. I like it a lot. Go read this graphic novel. I like it a lot. Go listen to this piece of music. I like it a lot. That's not enough. Education is not for everyone. Not everyone is an educator. I understand this. But I was telling my wonderful husband, Professor Geek, yesterday, apart from him and a few others, I think actually Fanman, his friend, is very good about this as well when it comes to things like horror, the horror genre. Professor Geek, what really makes him stand out from the rest of the crowd as far as YouTube commentary is that he not only has a scholarly approach to things like stories and archetypes, he can explain why something is meaningful. So if you go to his recent analysis, whether Graham Nolan or Ethan Van Sciver, it's not just a review on what's good. Especially with Cyberfrog, his analysis is very much linking tenets. I talk about tenets, core fundamental things that make a story work. And he'll use Cyberfrog as an example of that. And what that does, in the case with something like Cyberfrog, it can cause other people to think, oh, that's a really interesting connection. I might want to read Cyberfrog because he got me intrigued with that aspect of it, that element of storytelling. Professor Geek doesn't say, oh, I love Cyberfrog. The art is wonderful. The story is wonderful. He goes into how deep and meaningful it can be. And that's the best way, I would say, to educate people on, and I use that word very carefully. I am a teacher, so I'm not really too shy with using that word. I know some people can link educate with program or indoctrinate or whatever. That's not what I mean by educate. Professor Geek, as well as being a geek and a scholar, he's a professor. He's a real professor. He's an instructor. He knows how to teach. I've had 8 years or so of teaching music, so I've learned the art of teaching. And so, yes, it does have, you have some skill. You learn skill. You learn how to speak. You learn how to analyze with the profession of teaching, with the profession of instruction. But maybe you say, okay, well, I'm not that. I'm a creator, and I'll recommend good art. I'll promote good art, but I can't really explain why this is good. And I would encourage you, maybe try, whether it's on your own YouTube channel, if you have that, whether you're writing a blog, maybe writing out an essay, like an informal essay. Say why you like something, and don't be superficial about it. By that I mean, don't say, well, I saw this as a kid and it really spoke to me as a kid. It's like, well, why did it speak to you as a kid? Well, I really like the characters. Well, why do you like the characters? Well, they were really cool when I was a kid. It's like, what makes them special? What makes them unique from all other characters? Every character has an archetype, has a trope. Stories will have tropes, which is fine, I think. But stories also have some unique signature about them. You can't say Lord of the Rings and Star Wars are two of the same animal. They're not. They're completely different. They're very unique from one another, even though they've also garnered massive success and worldwide appeal. What makes them special? And I think most people can have a very they can acquire some fundamental level of analysis and say, well, this is why Star Wars is special. This is why Star Wars is special and distinct from Star Trek, even though Star Trek is special. This is why Stargate is really special and very different from Star Trek. There's almost this and Prof and I kind of make fun of this of people, and I've had roommates like this, and Prof has had friends like this, but it's like, if you like two different stories of the same genre, so Stargate and Star Trek, people will say, well, which one do you like? Like, well, why can't you like both? But they're different. They're different in personality. They're different with they have their own signature. They have their own, it's like a heart. Like both TV series have their own heart and soul to them, but they're unique. They're not the same thing. And then there's this kind of animalistic competition. Well, if you like Stargate, then you can't like Star Trek or whatever. Or it's like, well, I prefer one to the other, but they're both meaningful in their own way. When I was in work, one last example before I get into the chat, when I was in work as a receptionist, all these project managers, they would see the Marvel movies or the DC movies, and there's this competition, like, well, I'm a DC guy, I'm a Marvel guy, and I know there's a preference, but the two are uniquely meaningful in their own way. You don't have to despise DC if you like Marvel. Maybe you gravitate toward Marvel than you do DC. Maybe you don't read or watch DC at all. It doesn't, that's it's kind of silly when there's that like animalistic, competitiveness. Like, well, one has to beat the other. No, they're both special in their own way. Just like a mom saying of her kids, "Oh, you all are special in your own unique way," and it's true. It's true. All right, I think I explained everything. So let's. I think I said everything I wanted to say. Let's see what you guys are all saying. The All right. The light. Let me adjust this light real quick because it's kind of. Ooh, I think I moved my phone. All right. Oh, you adjust the camera just a little bit. It's a very precarious situation. Like I have this like little lighting set up, and then it could fall anytime. All right. Okay, so let's start with stunning and brave. I think this is the first comment I could see. Another way to fight the culture war: promote fan-made work that is actually honoring the source material that's being torn to pieces by Hollywood. That's a wonderful suggestion. Honoring what had come before, I think, is a huge thing. Whether that is fan artwork and that's the ability. I hate to use this word. It's the first word that comes to mind, but almost evangelize and good fan work, good fan art can do that. So people are appreciative of things like Star Trek, and there's people pay homage to the first series, with different ideas, different stories, and also things like the Next Generation. And I think that's fine. Yeah, I think we can. There's plenty of room for something like that. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Andrea says, "Is Sound Engraver going to be the hero of culture?" It's like, well, I don't think it's a solo hero thing. It's, I want to contribute. you know, my space, my favorite area as far as art is concerned is sci-fi. So, I mean, I can't be the ambassador of something like fantasy. But yeah, sci-fi, like good sci-fi is really important to me. I love Stargate. We haven't finished everything. We're season 7. I love that show. It's so much spirit to it. It's deep, it's optimistic, and it's deep. A lot of people really want like, oh, you can't be deep unless you're edgy and dark, and it's like, no. Well, also you can still be optimistic and have very dark undertones for some of the episodes or storylines. It's a wonderfully done sci-fi show. I look forward to watching more sci-fi because I'm a sci-fi reader before I'm a sci-fi watcher. But anyway, I mean, writing good sci-fi stories is very important to me. I have things in the works, but I'm not expecting to publish anything. Well, short stories, I'd like to do that within the next year or so. But long form, probably it's going to be another 2 or 3 years, depending on how fast I go. I had a great writing stint today. I wrote before my stream. I wrote about 850 words, and it was just in the flow, and the dialogue was. I was like, okay, this is where I'm going with the plot and everything. It was good. It was good. It's quickening the pace finally. I mean, I mean to quicken the pace anyway, but some of that is really hard to ascertain if you're in the thick of it. Like if you're writing your draft and you think things are going really slowly, but maybe they're going faster than you think because it's different to write it and edit it than to, read it from a different pair of eyes or as a different pair of eyes. Oh man, what is this? I'm gonna see what this looks like without. That might even be better. This yellow light. I don't know. We'll see. I don't have the greatest light in this little corner. But that light is like made my eyes look a little sleepy. Brian Gil Martin says, let's see, I think you were. Oh, you're using the example of the YouTuber who was complaining about pronouns in a game, and then while he is playing the game, which is exactly the wrong thing to do. I cannot imagine being angry at something and spending my time in it. Now, people can't do this with food and they can't do this with music, but like if you I've been in concerts where the music actually upsets me. And if I know it's going to be like 5 more minutes, okay, I'm like, okay, let me just stay in my seat. Or once it's done, because I just don't like to be a rude attendee. Once it's done, I'm leaving. I'm leaving the venue. But for some reason, people can do that in things like movies and games. I will say this, though. If you are incentivized, I'm not saying, I want to be careful when I say this. Some people are incentivized in different ways. So if people can spend so many hours being angry at something and putting that online and getting monetary value from it, some people can do that. Do I fault them? I don't know. I talk to them about it, saying, "Hey, is this really good for your soul?" But here's the thing. I also think some people love to hate things. I think we've unfortunately reached that point of the, point of the trajectory, this cultural trajectory where we're like, for instance, like some of the Star Wars movies actually wrecked people. I remember listening to someone who said that like Force Awakens made him physically ill. I'm like, okay. I'm sad what's happening in Star Wars too, but if it actually makes me ill, like psychologically and physically ill, it's like you gotta take a step back and do something else. You can't be so visceral about something. Like don't worsen your health over something you have absolute control over, But I think some people do. In the YouTube space, I think people do have the incentive for spending, like, I don't know, gameplay is at least 50 hours now, right? 50 hours. Rings of Power, the show, is going to amount to, I think, 52 hours of screen time. That is more than 2 whole days. What would you rather do? Watch that you know you don't like and that upsets you, makes you sad for Tolkien and all that, or read something else or watch something else. All right, where are we? I was sorry, I was trying to move the mouse. That's why I had that sound effect. Brian Gilmartin says, the idea of someone wanting absolute power over everything for its own sake is a scary thought. Oh, it's a wicked thought. It's an absolutely wicked thought. Probably one reason so few people are willing to entertain the thought that such people are real. Yeah, I mean, that's one way to control the situation. If you, by your presence or by the existence of your good art piece, if you can, it's like, don't make a statement on purpose. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't say like, haha, with this novel, I'm gonna get at them. I'm gonna get at the other side. That's why I absolutely did not care for. Excuse me. That's why I absolutely did not care for that space opera I read last year, because it was saying, the author was saying, I hated what happened to Star Wars, so I'm gonna make a real good space opera in reaction to that. And it was the most one-dimensional story I had ever read. It was so dry, it was so flat. And he did that, his motive for doing that, I'm not saying it's completely invalid, but I think that was his sole motive. Like, I'm gonna make a great space opera in reaction to what has happened to Star Wars. And it's like, that is not the way to go. That is not the way to go. All right. Samuel Proctor says, I actually do think there is light ahead. That's good. Me too. I don't know how soon that will be. Regimes rise and falls, and regimes rise and fall all the time. I don't know when this one will fall, but I do believe we're at least past its height. Yeah, like its climax. Some people have like no hope for 2030. I have this strange optimism about 2030. I'm not saying it's going to be easy to get there. Um, I just, I think we're seeing a level of intolerance that we needed for a long time. I know people want to be friends with everybody and make sure everyone's okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when people, when they use such language saying, no, everything's fine, we'll just, we'll live and let live. But if there's a faction of people who do not share those views, who want to trample on you, you can't live and let live, You can't have this like everything is love kind of feel when people want to get you, you know? And now I think people, after a good 10 years of dealing with it, now people are responding and saying, okay, we let you have we let you have your cake, okay? We let you eat your cake, and now you want your cake. Can't have it both ways. And people are standing up. I think, I'm not saying they're too late, too little too late, but it could have been earlier. People could have said no nonsense, like no. Like I miss the no nonsense. I miss that dry, cutthroat no nonsense, like, hey, knock it off. Like, people don't say knock it off anymore. People don't tell other people to be quiet. And I don't mean in a censorship kind of way. I'm like, hey, you don't need to do that. And that's just to show people, okay, you don't have control over my life. And we're seeing more of that, though. I think so. All right. Let's continue. Ghost Planet says, I have alternatives like anime and manga and older stuff from the past, and I own physical media like VHS tapes and DVDs, which is wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I'll use the example of my own personal life. Stargate this is the first time I've seen Stargate, and it's like 20 years old now, and I was like, it's great. It holds up. Megatron says, your music doesn't sound inclusive enough. That's the wonderful thing about electronic instrumental music, is anyone can listen to it. Yeah. Elias Jones is in the house. Good to see you. You ask, who started the culture war? The conservatives who constantly bang on the war drums about culture war, or the people who merely aren't certain what a woman is? The culture war, I'm making the argument that it's been a lifelong, it's been generations long. It has lasted for many generations in different ways. It's really, I'm not saying it started with the academics, but it was getting quite prevalent in the academic space. With the onslaught of World War I, people had a huge cultural and artistic reaction. They had seen I'll say this carefully because I'm putting it in a nutshell, and it's a lot more complicated than that. But when they saw the onslaught of World War I, when people, especially in Europe, saw the amount of destruction that came from bureaucratic decisions and national and international conflict, maybe one reaction was, okay, we don't want to see beautiful things brought down again, like structures, like buildings and stuff like that. But there was also a sentiment, I know this because I read this before, in the academic space and in the artistic space, people thought, well, this traditional individualism coming out of the Romantic period, in the 1800s, this bourgeois idea of traditional art and beauty, this is what caused the political implications of World War One. So because of that, because art was linked some in this way to, the political higher ups in the state, well, we can't have art like that anymore. Now, I'm saying one factor. I'm not saying that this was the sole reason for it, but there was an international and artistic critique of art that had come before World War One. And so they started changing it up with how music should be defined, how sound should be defined, how architecture should be, how painting should be. And it was an attempt to get people out of complacency that had really festered in with political bureaucracy. Again, this is the nutshell. I'm not saying all of the things because it's a very complicated process. In fact, I'm sure a lot of YouTube channels who devote themselves to art history and music history and the academic space, they have a much better way of saying it, a lot more concise way of saying it. But it was a social reaction and push against the traditional beauty. Had there not been World War One, maybe we wouldn't have the problem we have today as far as art and the liberal arts education. I don't know. That's a supposition. That's more a question of speculation. But because of the war, because of aristocracy, bureaucracy, divisions of class in the Romantic period, a lot of people were attributing the beauty of something like a Beethoven symphony or something like an opera. They were pointing to that, saying, this could have led to this social implication here. Let's do away with that. That's one factor. That's just one factor. I'm not spelling everything, but it's been long. So I would say that has started the cultural war, at least as far as art has been concerned with. One second here. Megatron says, I had to unfollow a couple people on Twitter because they kept talking about the new Velma season. It's like, have you not learned your lessons the first time around? Yeah. It's an addiction. Who at this point can honestly say that a certain series coming up or a game coming up, even a game, should be completely perfect? Now, apparently for the game, I have no idea the news behind Stellar, or is it Stellar Blade or Stella Blade? I don't know. I don't even know the title. Cool. Now everyone's seeming to be obsessed. Like, we got our games back with this one game. And it's like, well, I think it was made in Asia, so that's a little different. It's going to be different. It's not going to have the same Western social implications. So there's that. But it's like, oh, this game is good. Now we have a turnaround. It's like, no, there's no turning point. Not now, anyway. As I said before, there's not going to be a turning point. Not until one side wins or loses. And I know that sounds extreme, but there's going to be antagonism all the way. This invasion and festering of ideology in all art forms is not going away anytime soon because they understand the cultural tenet, the importance of art in Western culture. In any culture, but again, I'm speaking from the Western cultural perspective. I think, was it Megatron that talked about conservatives? David Stewart did a good video recently, like about a month ago or so. He talked about why conservatives do not understand art and culture. Now, it's not, he wasn't arguing that no, he wasn't arguing conservatives can't make good art. That he wasn't saying that. I think he got some pushback for that, but that's not what he was saying. He was saying at least conservatives in the political arena do not understand the cultural implications present with mainstream art or pop culture. They don't understand it on the level I don't think as my husband does. as Professor Geek, he like we know the importance of culture and art and the link between the two. More than when I say conservatives, I don't mean just conservatives because Prof has conservative leanings. I have conservative leanings, and we're both artists in our own way. David Stewart also, RJ. It's not to say that conservatives don't know art. It's within the political arena, whether it's the actual political institutions or even people like, I guess they're getting better about it, but people from the Daily Wire. It's like, but I guess I know very little about this, but I guess people like Matt Walsh, he was kind of downing. He was so much like wasn't he like dismissing the importance of video games? Now I think one guy, I don't listen to people from Daily Wire, but one person I had listened, not because he was affiliated with Daily Wire, but I think he has his own YouTube channel. And I forgot his name, Clavin. I think his name is Andrew Clavin. He, out of all of those guys, understands art. By the way, you want to hear how someone can make an art piece sound special, go to him. He is very knowledgeable. He's so eloquent. He can very effectively say what makes an old classic movie meaningful. We need more people like him. And I'll try to be better about that myself. That would be a learning process for me too. All right, let's continue on down. Amiel, welcome. You say, who would notice if social media went down for a day, though? They've ruined their own platforms already. I mean, we would definitely notice. I remember sitting in a car shop like years ago, and I didn't have Facebook at the time. I probably haven't had Facebook since, actually. And I think there was a day when Facebook went down, and it was public. It was like national news. And I remember being in the car shop just watching the TV and just laughing. It's terrible. I shouldn't laugh at such a situation, but people did freak out then. I don't know I don't know. I mean, if YouTube went down for a day, I'd be sad. Oh, by the way, YouTube. Okay, so maybe it's changed since the filming of this live stream. But I did reach 2,900 subscribers. So I am 100 subscribers away from 3,000. So if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Make sure you're subscribed because I'd like to get that number up. I would love to get to 3,000 by this summer, or at least this year. So subscriber count is important to me too. Oh, let's see. Andreas says, I think more people are becoming aware and fighting back. Examples is companies localizing, translating anime wrong so they can sneak in their ideology. Average anime fans just want accurate translations. Yeah, so hopefully there's pushback on that. Yeah, that's really important. I know there has to be a good skill, a level of skill to translate the Japanese, the Korean, not just culturally, but just the language itself to the modern day English. So hopefully there is pushback. Hopefully people who are translators or who provide the translations are being responsible themselves. I'm getting a little nervous about Nintendo. I hope Nintendo does not. I know there's Nintendo Japan and Nintendo North America. Now I'm talking about Japan. I really do hope Nintendo out of Japan is not catering to our social whims here over in North America. It's never been a good idea as far as games are concerned. Like Final Fantasy with its translations and all that. Um, I had read, I haven't played this game before, but I actually do want to play this game, and that is Paper Mario, uh, A Thousand Year Door. Is that what it's called? It was released in 2004. I never played it, but I knew it was a really, really popular game for years. And I think they're doing a remake. And I had read an article that they're cutting out a scene where three Goombas are catcalling the female Goomba character in that game. And I was reading the cat calls and I was looking at the little paper Goombas and I thought it was really funny. Like there's nothing offensive. It's just boys being jerks. And I thought it was really funny and you know, she tells them to kick rocks or whatever. And and they and the company, Nintendo, I think, feels obliged to remove that scene because catcalling is such a sensitive thing. I had friends so mad at me for like yeah, like very few like because I would live in the country or not in the country, but I was in more rural southern area, so people were a lot more polite. But I had a couple instances where that happened to me, and I remember female friends of mine on Facebook getting mad at me for not getting mad enough about being catcalled. I was like, I sorry. I won't see those people again. It's not like they're posing a threat, you know. But anyway, I was like, Nintendo, why are you doing that? Like, why would you cut out a scene for catcalling with Goombella or whatever? It's like, it's fine. It's fine. All right. Let's continue. Brian Gilmartin says, honestly, walking away is good advice for dealing with toxic people in general. Oh, yeah. I mean, even when things are pretty addictive to see, if you actually turn it off for like a day or two, I hate to admit, but it does wonders to the mental health. If you wouldn't stay, you say, if you wouldn't stay with an abusive spouse, why would you tolerate an abusive entertainer? I mean, maybe people, well, I mean, with an abusive spouse, whether verbal or physical, it is still much more personal. I don't think people understand the entertainment space as abuse. I don't think a lot of people understand they're addicted to the stuff. They're not self-evaluating. They're not reflecting. It's like, oh, is this really good for my well-being? Now, they may be aware of the effects. I think this will cause, I've said this before, I think this will cause psychological effects. Not major, severe psychological effects, but I think this will cause people, I don't know how to put it, because I don't want to put it in a medical way, but 10 years from now, this kind of, the constant watching what you hate and taking abuse from producers and showrunners, that's got to have an emotional and maybe psychological impact in the future in some way. It could be a subtle way, but I don't think it's a good thing. It's not going to, you're not going to improve, your mental health is not going to improve with this kind of behavior. Hello, Junk. Good to see you. Adega Outlaw says, good art is the proof of intelligence and the necessity to justify civilization. Prove me wrong. I don't want to prove you wrong. I think that's pretty valid. All right, coming on down. You say, oh, actually, Junk says, art without foundation is a body without a skeleton. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and you can't, that's a good way of putting it. You can't move, you can't walk, you can't hold something, you can't pick something up. Yeah, that's really important. You say, Brian, one younger creator I can think of is Micah Curtis on YouTube and Twitch. He wrote Inglewood and 3 Nights, 4 Days, and started his own company, Grindstone Arts. Very nice. Junk also agrees that he likes mica. That's cool. Junk says backgrounds, because I was talking about the quality of the backgrounds and comic book, recent comic book art. You say backgrounds have been the bane of a lot of artists for a while. Many comics just use photographs as shortcuts. Oh, that's probably true. Yeah. Yeah, I feel the emptiness. Like this one art piece that I saw last night, it looked too clean. It wasn't bad, but it looked very sterile. It looked like, and maybe they were first renditions of the area, you know? Who's to say? But I don't think so. I think when people promote their works on their campaigns, they promote more or less the final product of something. And I mean, why wouldn't they? So I was a little like, oh, you're missing the mark here. So, and I don't want that to happen. I want people to really up the ante as far as quality. Ace says it's shameful how Eisner's name has been tainted by the Eisner Award being given to these hacks. Ooh, I didn't know about that. Ugh, that's a shame. All right, moving along down. Ginyu says, "Prof is a beast," and then my wonderful husband replies with the sunglasses emoji. Andrea says, of the Prof is the one person to take stories seriously. He is not like a conservative that says stories are just kid stuff, or a liberal that says stories are problematic. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you really do have to take it very seriously. Like, it's a wrong route to take, among the political conservatives who are more in the political space. They're not really in the art space. They need to watch what they say about art, because I've heard conservatives saying you shouldn't care about art like you should care about people starving in Africa. I'm like, you could care about both. Okay, feed children, feed people who are starving, and make good art and talk about why art is important. It's like, no, you need to that's such a scarcity mindset. The entrepreneurs say scarcity mindset. There's like, that's such a scarcity mindset, People need to, you can be involved in both, and there's no split personality. There's no, you're not, having too many priorities. You can honor the well-being of people and promote good art and make good art. And you could still have one life, one identity. And I feel like conservatives are like that, saying it's not as important as, solving cancer. It's like, yeah, finding a cure to cancer is really, really important. And then people are like, well, you should focus on that instead of making art. If everyone contributed to finding a cure to cancer, that would be better. It's like, then and I've said this before, I'm actually writing a short story based on this, then you're in survival mode. You're only around to exist. Maybe cancer's gone. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, maybe there's no illness, no pestilence, no poverty, no starvation in the world, and everything's great. But you're just existing. You're not being inspired. We're not made to just settle with just existing. So even if our bellies are full and we have the right medicine and there's no disease, that's wonderful. I mean, everyone should have that much. But we also need to be inspired. We need to have experiences that transcend our physical limitations. And I don't mean a transcendental, like, oh, out-of-body experience. I'm just saying we got to be inspired. We got to see things outside our own selves and our own existence. All right. Oh, got something in my eye. My prof says, The Vulcans, Belger. And frankly, I don't know how you can call yourself a scientist and not worship at the altar of Roddenberry. That was a great show between these two geeky scientists. And one was Professor Geek and one was Fan Man. But no, it was these two scientists who, one was a Star Trekkie, or Trekkie. He loved Star Trek. And then the scientist, like, pretty much just idolized, the other scientist idolized Jack O'Neill, you know, the Colonel. He's like, oh, my heroes. I'm working with my heroes. It is so funny. So funny. All right, it is 7:11 my time. I'm going to wrap it up in a few minutes, but let's see. Megatron says, is it really that hard? Some of these people can't read a couple Legends books. Just abandon Disney and you'll feel better. I'm actually reading Shatterpoint. I will say that, you know, with Mace Windu, at first I really wasn't on board because for some reason, maybe I wasn't in the right headspace. Like the first few chapters, it was really hard for me to comprehend. I just wasn't in the right headspace to like it. And then Professor Geek says, just wait until he gets on the planet and see what happens. I'm like, okay, I need to give this book a chance. And now that things are in motion with Mace Windu on the planet, Narom Ka, I think it's called, I'm appreciating what's happening, especially with his relationship and connection to the Force. I'm not even midway. I'm not even halfway into the book, but I did have to get to the planet to appreciate it. And I love the intimate structure because we're exclusively in Mace Windu's thoughts, both with his like quoting his journal or recording his journal. So we're in his first person perspective, and then we are into his third person perspective, and it's great. I'm looking forward to seeing what is happening. Also, if you're curious, Professor Geek with Big Al Presents did a book study, I think a year ago. They did a book review of Shatterpoint. So if you've read Shatterpoint and never saw that book study, I recommend it. All right. All right. Andrea says, what's the space opera called? Sound Engraver. I'm curious. I guess okay, so I made the book, or excuse me, I read the book and made the video a year ago now. I never revealed who it was or what the work was, but I think it's safe now. The space opera that I reviewed and didn't mention is called Galen's Way. So Galen''S. Galen's Way. It's an Italian name. I can't remember off the top of my head the man who wrote it. And I think he was intending to have this be a series. I have no idea how far he is into the series, but that was the first work. Now, I've had people discover who I was talking about, like in certain comments, because that was actually a really popular video. I was surprised. And one or two people got who I was talking about, and I maybe probably because I was talking about the story. And what was I going to say? I think they came up. It's like, oh, I read that story. Are you talking about this story? I read that, and I thought it was wonderful. I'm like, good for you. I didn't. I'm sorry. But that's the story. And I'm not saying you shouldn't read it. Just if you want to watch my review of it. It's called my video is called How Not to Read a Space Opera. No, How Not to Write a Space Opera. Yeah. All right, moving along down. I'm just going to scroll a little past here. Final Fantasy is with us. Good to see you. Final Fantasy says, a lot of people at Daily Wire are absolutely dismissive. Let's be honest. I don't really know enough about them. I just have impressions. But the person I do like listening to is Clavin. I think that's his name. I remember playing some Nintendo, and I didn't want the music stuck in my head, so I listened to a YouTube commentary, and he was in the feed, and I was like, oh, let's listen to him, and I was playing Secret of Mana or something while listening to him. I'm like, this is great. I like his yeah, Clavin. Yeah. Ginyu says he likes Clavin. Final Fantasy includes, they are the YouTube equivalent of Fox News. I don't watch Fox News. There, I haven't really watched it. There's a late night show I used to watch. I watch from time to time, and I just, maybe my ear is just getting a little tinny with that kind of commentary, but I just can't enjoy it. I don't really take it seriously anymore, so I really haven't watched anything of Fox News in a long time. I never really liked it, even when I thought it was okay. Final Fantasy fan says, unfortunately, Nintendo North America has been catering to the people who don't Nintendo games, don't do Nintendo games, since they've changed the box art of Princess Peach, Showtime, and the recent patch of Pokemon Go. I didn't know anything about that. All right. You guys are really giving me some great comments. I can't read them all, but I do appreciate that. I do want to go for a little walk before date night. Excuse me. It's not just actual, Amy L says it's not just actual artists or the corporations. Editors are under great pressure to conform. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree. Samuel Proctor says, I had a similar experience with courtship of a Princess Leia. Oh, it's like, what are you talking about? Talking about like a girl who cosplayed Princess Leia. That's a story, isn't it? I first read it, and the love triangle with Han, Leia, and the prince rubbed me the wrong way. Then tried it again a few months ago, and it's so dang good. Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, that's good. All right. And Samuel agrees. Clavin is actually a great writer and very prolific. Yeah, he's the one person I would trust. Yeah, as far as opinion is concerned. So, let's leave it at that. It's way past my 90-minute mark. I knew I was going overboard. So we will end it there. So probably nothing as far as music, videos. I've been having a wonderful time composing and writing. I've been on a roll with composing and writing. So it's probably just going to be live streaming only for a little bit until I find some other things to do with music and SuperCollider and Logic Pro. But yeah, you'll definitely see me with streaming. Weekly streams will continue, and I'll put out a short or two depending on how succinct I am. So with that, you guys, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you tuning in. You guys believe in you do believe in the importance of the culture war, and I think that's been a wonderful thing. The fight it's a lifelong battle. Just remember that. But until I see you next, keep producing, preserving, and promoting that good art you love. And I will catch you later. Thanks.